Today we will build this particular web app. You'll be able to upload any image that has text on it and have the text extracted from the image directly onto the page, so it will be displayed here. So we'll test the app right now. I'm going to upload a picture. We click extract. So this was the picture that I uploaded. This was just randomly Googled. And as you can see, the text is extracted and it appears for the user right above. So without further ado, let's start building this app. The first thing you want to do is navigate to my GitHub. I'll leave the link in the description, and you can find this particular repo. We will get the link for it and we can move on into our VS. So we will just open a brand new folder, do git clone, paste that link, and we can start building together from this exact file system. So you can see a couple of files already there, and we have to discuss a couple of things that you need before you can run this project. So the first things first, let's install everything that Python needs to run this. Good practice is to create your own virtual environment so none of your dependencies clash, and we will do that. So in this particular folder, you can navigate. In our working folder, we can create a new environment. So we can say Python, and this should create a new environment for us. I'll navigate to PowerShell, but you can activate this any way you really want, the in Bash or PowerShell. So going into to activate it, we want to go, we want to go into the script folder. Now we want to go into VNV first and then scripts. So here, if we type in activate.ps1, we can activate our environment. And as you can see now, there's this prefix with the exact name of my environment, meaning that now we have activated our environment. So just to reiterate, for those of you that haven't done this before, you type in this particular command to create a virtual environment. So this is the command. After you run this, you navigate into the scripts folder, and there you activate by typing in this /activate.ps1. So now we will install the dependencies that we need for our project, and you can see in this requirements.txt you have everything listed here. So you can just type in, we want to make sure that we are in the main folder again. So we will go back, and now we can type in pip install our requirements.txt. This will install all the dependencies that we need for this project. Lastly, we need to discuss how we will be implementing the AI aspect of this web app. So we're going to be using PyTesseract, and now we have installed the Python wrapper for it, but we also need to install the proprietary software and run it on our machine. And the way to do that, if you go into README, I've written some basic explanation on how to do that. So we need to install this Python wrapper. We have just done that. So that was us installing with pip. But we also need to install this. So navigate to this link and install Tesseract for Windows. Without this, you won't be able to run the program. I will include the link for this as well in the description, but anyone can just Google Tesseract for Windows installation and it will give you the download option. And as soon as it's installed, that's it. You're ready to go. With all the requirements met, you can start building this project. Next thing we want to do is to make sure that we can run our Flask app. So we will just prepare the layout for our web app, and we can discuss then one by one what goes in which file. You will see that as soon as you did git clone, you already got this config.py. I don't think there is much necessary to discuss here. This is just the configuration file for our Flask app, and you can basically just use it the same way how you see it here. Here, only thing you might want to do different is define the upload folder, the upload file path for yourself. So if you remember, our app had an option to upload the image that will then be giving the text extracted to the display. So this will be the folder where those images get uploaded to. So you can choose any folder in your documents. It's entirely up to you. Other than that, I don't think there's anything necessary to discuss in regards to the config.py page. Moving on, we want to create a app.py, and this will be the main file that actually runs our app. And all it's going to say, from app, import app. So this will go into the app folder, this one here, where we will have all the files for our web app. And it will just import that into our file here, the one that runs backend. And we'll say that if name is _main, then we just want to run our app. That's all we are going to do with this. And we'll create another file here where we'll write the logic for the AI processing, but we're going to leave this empty for now. And then if you navigate into your app folder, you'll see that you have two subfolders, static and templates. In the templates, you'll see index.html. If you open that, you will see that there is already pretty much everything done here. The reason why most of this is already completed is that I didn't want to focus this particular tutorial on building front end, even though we will discuss this front end so that you understand every line of code here. So I will guide you through it, but I didn't think it will be necessary. It will be kind of a waste of time to discuss every single aspect of this, especially talking about CSS and stuff. It's not the purpose of this video. And then in the static, you will see that you have two subfolders, images and uploads. And this will just manage when we want to upload a picture. All of them will go into this particular folder called uploads. So as you saw earlier, this was the picture that I used for test. So it naturally ended up being uploaded into this folder. And in the images here, I'm just using the logo from my channel. This is something you can, for the sake of just practicing and building the same app, you can use this. You don't have to, you can put anything you want here, or you can ignore it entirely. You can delete this one. That's entirely up to you. But that's the brief explanation of our folder structure. And with that being said, we can start building our app. So what we're going to do first is we're going to do the backend logic of our AI processing of the image. So we just installed the Tesseract and we can start writing the code for that. So this will be our AI model that will take an image as an input and give text as output. This is just a brief explanation for it. So we'll get an image as an input and the output coming out will be a string derived directly from the actual image. So we want to start by importing our libraries, both NumPy as NP, and to manage images, we'll import this. And just change this back to import. So we want to specify the path to the Tesseract executable. So earlier I mentioned to you that you have to download the Tesseract software, their proprietary software. And the way to do that is by going onto the GitHub link. When you find the installer, the Windows installer, and once the installation is finished, you want to get the path and copy it into this particular variable. So most likely it will be the same as you see it here. If it's not, you might have to do some tinkering and find this exact file. So this is needed for the program to run. You want to save this file path into this variable. So we'll write a function that will extract the text. Parameter for it will be the file path of the image file, and it will return a string. So like we said, the AI model will take an image as an input. So that's the image path, and the output being a string type. That's this bit here. So we want to say that image will use the image library from PIL, and it will open the image path, so the variable passed in our method. And then Tesseract will do its magic and do image to string from image. We want to remove symbols and split by lines for better display. So this is just for readability, and I've actually produced this just by querying ChatGPT what characters could kind of be problematic in that sense. So to manage then this particular idea, we want to write this line here. Moving on, we're going to create some distance. Once again, we are with these last 3 lines of code, we are just working on creating readability in our output. And this will just split the lines with a break. So if you remember from like Python basics, this end character here will create, it's like a space line to create some division. And then finally, we want to just return text lines. So this will be the string output. So that's all. This library pretty much does everything for you, and that's how simple the AI aspect of it is. And we want to try and test this now and see if this runs properly. So we're going to say test and run by saying image path, and we want to give the path of the image. So I might just use the one that I had here again. So I will go and copy. Let's try copying relative path. So we'll give it the path. I believe I need to change these to /s too. Just want to test this and make sure that I'm actually printing this. So if we do python ml.py, yes, it gives me the correct path to the image, as we can see. So it's always good to test these things before you actually run your program or something like that. You catch errors before they become too much to handle. So we will say then that the extracted text is, and then we want to run our function that we just defined here. So we can just call the function and give it the parameter of our image path, which was this. So if we give it that, and then we want to just show our extracted text, so we can print this particular variable. So the extracted text is, and then we can just give it the variable. So if we try running this now, got an error. So I've just changed the way how the path is given. So we want to delete this bit, and we'll just give it a dot to say from the current file, from the current directory, go into app. And I believe this is all we need to do. So if we run now, we see that we get the extracted text in this particular string. So this works now, and that's all we needed for our backend. We can comment this out and move on. Next thing we want to do is go into our app folder, and we will open templates just to discuss the front-end aspect. So like we said, we will not write this code from scratch. I don't think it's necessary for this particular project. We can just discuss that it's just a HTML page with some CSS and Bootstrap. That's all it is. Using this particular Bootstrap, there is some CSS that will just give some aesthetic aspects, but nothing too complicated. You can examine this on your own and play around with it if you choose so. So closing the CSS aspect, we can just talk about what's in the body of the HTML. So we have our upload image button, and upon submission, there is some logic, some templating that handles how once the image has been processed and we have our text in the form of a string, this is just some templating that will handle how it's being displayed. And that's pretty much all that it is. So without talking, if we open this by itself, so if you open this by itself, just as a file, you can see how it looks. Like I said, the upload image element with the browse option for selecting the image, the button to extract, and then once we receive the output, when our backend processes the AI code we have just written, it will be formatted here. And we want to also display the image that we got the text from. So with the front end being sorted like that, we can now move on to building our Flask app, which I believe is the most important part of this video. So as you saw, the actual AI itself, we have Tesseract doing all the work for us. It's a very simple function. It just does all the work. We don't really have to do more than that. So we want to now build our Flask app. So the first thing we do is we'll create two new files. One called it views.py and the other one called init with 2 underscores, like such. So in this init file, we want to import Flask, and we want to say that our app is Flask. And then for the configure file, we will use the file that we got just from the Git repo. So we'll say from object, and then we will name this file config development config, like such. And we will also import views, and that's it. That's all you need. So the last thing that we need to do to finish off our web app is to write the backend logic in our views section. So again, we want to import Flask and app, and we want to request render template and URL for. We will also want to import OS to handle files. I have this recommendation from ChatGPT to use this particular library as a method of dealing with files when changing or modifying file names. So we'll move on with that. We also want to include your typical numpy, snp. We again need PIL and image, random string, and we want to import our function that we built. We want to add the path to config. So we'll say that app config is initial file uploads, and we will give it a path. So for us, that's in our static, and we'll write our route to the home page, the only page that we'll be using for our web app, and it will include methods both get and post. So I am assuming that at this stage you are familiar to at least the basics of HTTP protocol, and specifically the 4 requests that you can make: get, post, put, delete. So kind of basics of your CRUD systems, which stand for create, read, update, delete. If this line here means absolutely nothing to you, I would suggest finding a dedicated video for this particular reason. If you want a good understanding of what we are doing here, you wouldn't necessarily need to completely understand this just to finish off this web app, finish off this project, but I do highly recommend so. That being said, we're going to move on and write our index function, and this will now handle the flow of data. So we'll say that the full file name is URL for static, and the file name is in the images, so that's where we'll be storing. And then we want to say if image upload is now empty, so we'll say if request.method is post, that's what we want to handle first. Then we want to define the image upload to be the request files of image upload. So what we're doing here is saying that if there is a post request, it expects a file in the payload of that post request, and that file will then be stored in the variable image upload. So if you go back to what our web app looked, once the user clicks browse, once they choose the image they want the text extracted from, that image will go here into this image upload variable. So we want to save the file. Now we're going to use the secure file name and say that image upload dot file name, and then we want to define the file path using the OS join with app config initial file uploads comma file name. We'll say that image upload dot save in the file path. So now we want to use the Tesseract app, and we'll just use the method we created in our ml.py. So we want to call this particular method now and pass it an image that got uploaded. So we will say that the extracted text is the function. So we are calling this function right now. If you remember earlier, we wrote this line here, and this line invokes the usage of this particular function from our ml.py file. So we'll pass the file path for the image, and we want to have the image URL for static. We'll give it the file name uploads plus file name, and in our return we want to render the template that will be displayed. So we want to render the template of our HTML file that earlier we were looking at. So it's this particular HTML file, and we'll say that the URL is image URL, and the full file name is file path, and the text is extracted text. So we need to pass this back onto our front end, and this covers any post request coming towards this endpoint. So we have defined this endpoint. We mentioned that it will handle get and post requests, and the first thing find in our conditional statement here is what happens if there is a post request coming. This is the logic for the post request, and our return statement will finish processing of our post request. But else we want to handle a get request, and we will again give the HTML template. We want to give file name is full file name, and lastly This is just the standard for Flask apps. Just going to copy paste this bit. Main function for a Flask app. And you want to write this if _name is main, app.run debug equals true. And that's all we need to do. So let's try running our app now. So I'm going to type in, let me open this a bit more. So we want to write Python app.py. And we can see that our app is running live on our local host, port 5000. So we will open our browser and we will type in localhost, give it the 5000 port. And you can see that we have our front end. But let's see, does it work with the backend? So I'm choosing again that image. I'm clicking extract and the image is displayed with the text above. So everything works as intended, and this is our app. I hope you enjoyed it, and that's all.